Imagine a woman standing in the shadows of a world determined to silence her, a world that believed breaking her spirit would erase her story forever. Imagine the weight of secrets she carried, the dangers she navigated, and the quiet strength she guarded like a final heartbeat. Tonight, you will step into her world, a place where silence was not weakness, but a weapon. And once you hear her truth, you will never forget in a time when society's expectations for women were rigid and unyielding. Stepping outside the invisible lines could mean ruin. Across centuries, countless women have endured oppression not just from strangers or enemies, but from the very communities that claimed to uphold justice and morality. The story we are about to explore takes place in a period where speaking out could be dangerous, and silence could be misunderstood as submission. Yet, history has repeatedly shown that sometimes, silence is the most powerful response a woman can wield. Women were often seen as extensions of men, their identities tethered to husbands, fathers, or brothers. Their thoughts, feelings, and experiences were disregarded, treated as secondary or, at worst, inconvenient. In such an environment, a woman's very existence could be reduced to obedience, her value measured by her compliance rather than her courage or intelligence. But even within these constraints, many found ways to assert their agency quietly, subtly, and sometimes dangerously, navigating a landscape fraught with societal traps and moral judgments. Our story begins with one such woman, whose life seemed ordinary on the surface, yet concealed a depth of resilience and cunning that would astonish those around her. She lived among people who believed they understood her, yet they could not perceive the storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. Her silence, often mistaken for weakness or indifference, was actually a calculated form of resistance, a means of survival in a world where speaking up too loudly could lead to disastrous consequences. Scholars today point out that women like her were not anomalies but reflections of a broader pattern in human history, voices muted yet unbroken, constrained yet unbowed. Modern parallels are evident even now, in situations where individuals must navigate oppressive systems, workplaces, or relationships, finding subtle ways to protect themselves while still maintaining dignity and agency. Understanding her story requires stepping into her world, seeing through the lens of her fears and strategies, and recognizing the immense courage it took to endure what many could not even imagine. Tonight, as we unravel her experiences, we witness not only the perils she faced but also the quiet, indomitable strength that ultimately allowed her to reclaim power, in ways that those who sought to control her never anticipated. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoy dark history stories like this, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share your thoughts and feedback in the comments below. From the very beginning, her life was marked by subtle pressures that many would have dismissed as ordinary, yet each expectation and demand pressed down upon her like an invisible weight. She grew up in a household where appearances mattered more than honesty, where smiles hid tension, and where questions were discouraged if they threatened the delicate balance of control maintained by the adults around her. As a child, she learned quickly that silence could deflect suspicion, that listening could reveal more than speaking, and that even the smallest misstep could trigger disproportionate consequences. Her earliest memories are tinged with a peculiar mix of fear and fascination, a recognition that power in her world was wielded not only through strength but also through manipulation, reputation, and secrecy. Teachers, neighbors, and family friends all seemed to operate under the same unspoken rules. Outward compliance was expected, internal dissent invisible, and personal desire subordinate to social expectations. By the time she entered adolescence, the patterns of surveillance, judgment, and control were so ingrained that she moved through life with a kind of cautious grace, always calculating, always weighing the risk of exposure against the potential cost of expression. And yet, within her, there was a spark of defiance, a quiet refusal to be fully owned by circumstance, though she could not yet articulate it even to herself. At school, she observed the hierarchies among her peers, the subtle contests for dominance, the whispered rumors that could destroy a reputation in hours, the invisible chains of expectation that shaped behavior more forcefully than any explicit rule. Outside of school, she noticed similar dynamics in her community. Neighbors who seemed polite and friendly but would not hesitate to gossip, adults who claimed to uphold moral standards but punished those who stepped too far from convention, and social gatherings where smiles masked judgment and any hint of independence could be met with sharp criticism. She learned to navigate these realities with caution, using her silence as a shield and her observations as a map, charting safe paths through a treacherous world. By the age of 16, she had developed an acute sense of the stakes involved in every interaction. One wrong word, one ill-timed expression, could provoke scrutiny, accusation, or worse. Yet, she also began to notice something remarkable. Her silence, while often assumed to be submission, allowed her to gather information, to understand motives, to anticipate threats, and to shape responses with precision. Experts in psychology today note that such early experiences of hypervigilance can cultivate extraordinary observational skills and strategic thinking, even under stress, and her story exemplifies this principle in practice. As she matured, the stakes intensified. The family into which she married, or was expected to marry, was influential, their reputation nearly flawless in public view. Privately, however, the dynamics were far more sinister. Control, intimidation, and coercion formed the undercurrent of every interaction. Her husband, initially charming and attentive, revealed a side marked by possessiveness and meticulous scrutiny. Friends who seemed supportive at first turned cold when she failed to meet their expectations, offering praise only when convenient and criticism when the image of perfection was threatened. Neighbors watched closely, commenting in subtle tones about her appearance, behavior, and domestic duties, reinforcing the pressure to conform. With each passing year, she confronted situations where personal safety, emotional well-being, and social survival were intertwined, each decision weighted with consequences. Pregnancies, as they came, were both a source of hope and a new vector for control. The very fact that she carried life within her became a point of scrutiny. Doctors, family members, and even acquaintances assumed opinions about her choices, her body, and her readiness. The pressure was relentless, the expectation to perform, to smile, to comply, to hide discomfort, to present an image of flawless domesticity, all without complaint, was crushing. She learned quickly which words could be spoken safely, which gestures could be made without consequence, and which thoughts were best kept secret. Experts today highlight that individuals in such environments often develop coping mechanisms that resemble both submission and resilience, and her story demonstrates the complexity of such strategies in high-pressure situations. Her silence, while misunderstood, was never empty. She stored knowledge, read intentions, and anticipated threats, always calculating, always positioning herself where she could survive and, eventually, reclaim power. Social interactions were minefields. Casual comments by relatives could carry hidden meanings, friendly advice by neighbors could conceal judgment or threats, and the most innocuous domestic routines could expose vulnerability. Every visit, every meal, every conversation was an exercise in vigilance. And yet, she also began to experiment with small, subtle acts of assertion, gestures, choices of attire, minor decisions in the household that allowed her to test boundaries, gauge reactions, and quietly establish limits without overt confrontation. This was not rebellion in the conventional sense, but a form of careful resistance, a silent negotiation for autonomy within a system designed to suppress it. Over time, these practices accumulated into a network of control that she quietly exercised, unnoticed by those who assumed her compliance. It was in these quiet, measured decisions that her strength began to manifest, though she could not yet predict the magnitude of the consequences that awaited her. Life continued under this dual reality of observation and concealment until a critical moment arrived, a point where external events collided with personal agency, creating a situation that would test her endurance, intellect, and courage. The event was sudden, yet inevitable, a confrontation with authority figures, an unexpected complication within the household, a shift in social dynamics that threatened to unravel the careful balance she had maintained for years. Every decision now carried amplified risk. One misstep could expose her to public humiliation, domestic violence, or permanent social isolation. And yet, as experts in trauma and resilience note, such extreme pressure often catalyzes adaptive responses. Individuals discover reservoirs of strength they did not know existed, deploying strategy, intuition, and patience to navigate perilous circumstances. She faced the choice that would define her trajectory: speak up and risk immediate repercussions, or remain silent and build the foundations for a longer, more strategic form of empowerment. This choice, seemingly simple, required immense foresight, courage, and restraint. Each moment stretched indefinitely, each conversation laden with hidden meaning, each glance a potential threat. Friends who once seemed allies could become adversaries in an instant. Family members, sworn to protect, might act as enforcers. And the broader social structure, with its rigid hierarchies and unspoken rules, offered no guarantees. She was acutely aware that even small errors could ripple outward, affecting not only herself but those she cared for. Scholars of social dynamics emphasize that navigating such environments requires a combination of observation, patience, and selective action, qualities she had cultivated meticulously over the years. Her tactics were deliberate. Moments of apparent compliance masked strategic calculations, expressions of deference concealed careful monitoring, and quiet acceptance provided the cover needed to gather intelligence on intentions, weaknesses, and opportunities. Slowly, imperceptibly, she began to shape her environment, creating pathways for eventual assertion without provoking direct confrontation. The first visible sign of her subtle power emerged in interactions where her silence forced others to fill the gaps, revealing intentions, biases, and vulnerabilities that she could exploit later. Her silence, far from being a weakness, became a tool of leverage, a means of survival, and eventually, a source of influence. Experts note that such strategies are remarkably effective in highly oppressive or surveillance-heavy settings, where direct confrontation is dangerous, and long-term outcomes depend on patience, foresight, and nuanced maneuvering. As days turned into months and months into years, she accumulated knowledge, observed patterns, and gradually understood the mechanisms of control and manipulation around her. Each piece of information was a brick in the foundation of resilience she was quietly constructing, preparing for the moment when she could act decisively without endangering herself or those she loved. And when the tipping point arrived, an incident that seemed trivial to outsiders but monumental to her, it revealed the extraordinary effectiveness of her silent strategy. She responded not with immediate defiance, but with calculated moves that shifted the balance of power subtly yet irrevocably. The consequences for those who had sought to control her were both unexpected and profound, as the very mechanisms of authority they relied upon were turned against them, guided by her understanding, observation, and timing. Her story, though rooted in a specific historical and social context, resonates across time, illustrating the profound capacity for resilience, strategy, and empowerment under conditions designed to suppress individuality. Modern parallels are found in workplaces, families, and institutions where people navigate hierarchical pressures, societal expectations, or interpersonal control, using observation, patience, and subtle action to protect themselves and assert influence. In recounting her experiences, we see the interplay between vulnerability and strength, fear and courage, silence and power. Her journey demonstrates that survival and agency are not always loud, visible, or immediate but can be cultivated through careful attention, strategic patience, and unyielding inner strength. And it is in this nuanced, quiet mastery that the true power of a story lies, revealing that even when the world seeks to break a person, the human spirit has the capacity to endure, adapt, and ultimately prevail, often in ways that those who sought control never anticipated. The days that followed her first subtle assertion of control were filled with tension, anticipation, and calculated observation, as she navigated the consequences of her actions and watched the reactions of those who had underestimated her. Every glance from family members, every comment from neighbors, every interaction with authority figures carried a weight that demanded careful interpretation. She had learned to read the unspoken language of intention, the slight hesitation before a word, the rapid glance that betrayed anxiety, the small shifts in tone that revealed frustration or fear. And she knew that to misinterpret any of these signals could result in a setback or vice, drawing attention to her growing autonomy before it was fully secure. Experts today emphasize that individuals in such environments must balance patience with decisiveness, maintaining a sense of invisibility while strategically influencing outcomes. She embodied this principle with precision, moving through her daily life as if nothing had changed, even as she was acutely aware that everything had shifted. Her relationships became exercises in subtle negotiation, where power was measured not in overt actions but in reactions, responses, and the control of information. Friends who once held sway over her choices were gradually revealed to be manipulable, their own insecurities and assumptions exploited through careful questioning, observation, and silence. Every conversation became a study in human behavior, and she maintained meticulous mental notes, mapping alliances, weaknesses, and opportunities for leverage. The very household she inhabited, which had once seemed impenetrable in its hierarchy, slowly became a terrain she could navigate with increasing confidence. She discovered that authority could be influenced indirectly, through timing, selective disclosure, and calculated restraint. Modern parallels can be seen in corporate environments, political arenas, and social institutions, where individuals must operate under scrutiny while attempting to assert influence without provoking backlash. By the time she reached the second year of her struggle, her understanding of the dynamics around her had deepened to a remarkable degree. The strategies she employed were subtle yet deliberate. She allowed certain behaviors to proceed unchecked to create patterns of expectation, introduced minor deviations to test limits, and maintained a poised exterior while orchestrating the unseen currents of control behind the scenes. Her silence, far from being passive, became an active instrument of strategy, compelling those around her to reveal their true intentions. And yet, despite these careful maneuvers, she faced moments of acute vulnerability. Health scares, unexpected visitors, and sudden changes in household routines introduced variables she could not fully predict. Each incident required rapid recalibration, drawing on every ounce of her observational skill, emotional intelligence, and composure. Scholars in behavioral psychology note that navigating such unpredictable environments demands both cognitive agility and emotional resilience, qualities she exhibited consistently under pressure. Even as she gained influence, there were moments when fear crept back in, when the weight of isolation, misunderstanding, and potential reprisal threatened to overwhelm her. Friends could misinterpret her restraint as weakness, family could perceive her patience as submission, and external observers could overlook the deliberate orchestration underlying her calm demeanor. It was in these moments that her internal fortitude was tested most severely. Yet she persisted, understanding that temporary discomfort, strategic silence, and controlled visibility were essential to achieving long-term stability and eventual empowerment. The broader societal context added additional layers of complexity. Gendered expectations, cultural norms, and institutional biases all functioned as silent enforcers of compliance. Her every action was scrutinized against these invisible standards, and deviation, even subtle, was noticed, judged, and sometimes punished. She understood that to navigate such a landscape, she would need not only personal resilience but also a precise comprehension of the rules shaping her environment, the motivations of those enforcing them, and the vulnerabilities inherent in the systems of power surrounding her. Her meticulous approach involved observing patterns of behavior over time, noting inconsistencies, and leveraging small advantages to shift the balance subtly in her favor. She became adept at creating contingencies, preparing responses for potential confrontations, and building networks of influence where apparent compliance masked strategic planning. Experts today point out that such skillful navigation of hierarchical and oppressive systems represents a form of intelligence and agency that is often undervalued, particularly when it manifests quietly rather than loudly. Over time, she cultivated a presence that commanded attention without demanding it, influence without overt assertion, and power without immediate recognition. The people around her, unaware of the scope of her strategy, continued to operate under assumptions that she had conformed completely to their expectations. This misperception became a critical advantage, allowing her to operate with a freedom they did not anticipate, setting the stage for more significant shifts in her personal autonomy. As she approached critical milestones, moments of health crises, family disputes, or social scrutiny, she employed her accumulated knowledge with precision, balancing assertiveness and discretion, timing and observation, presence and invisibility. Each calculated move was aimed not at confrontation but at long-term stability and empowerment, ensuring that any response from others could be anticipated, managed, and leveraged. Psychological research highlights that individuals in high-pressure environments who cultivate this combination of patience, observation, and strategic action often achieve outcomes disproportionate to the apparent power they hold, a principle vividly illustrated in her story. She encountered moments of acute moral and emotional challenge, where decisions had immediate human consequences, protecting loved ones, managing risk, and maintaining her dignity while navigating the expectations and judgments of those around her. Each decision carried potential ramifications that extended beyond her personal sphere, affecting relationships, social standing, and long-term security. Yet she demonstrated remarkable clarity of thought, resilience, and composure, drawing on both instinct and learned strategy to make choices that advance her position while minimizing unnecessary risk. Even when faced with direct threats, intimidation, manipulation, or implicit coercion, she retained a composed exterior, masking the strategic calculations running continuously in her mind. Her resilience was a combination of cognitive acumen, emotional intelligence, and long-term vision, allowing her to maintain agency in an environment designed to erode autonomy. Modern analysts observe that such skillful navigation of power dynamics is often invisible to outside observers, misinterpreted as passivity or compliance, when in fact it represents a sophisticated form of survival and influence. Over time, her careful orchestration began to yield tangible results. Authority figures who had underestimated her patience and intelligence found themselves responding to initiatives she subtly guided, social pressures shifted in her favor, and the patterns of control around her were gradually altered without overt confrontation. Her strategy was cumulative: small victories, carefully timed interventions, and nuanced observation compounded to create a foundation of power that others could neither detect nor resist effectively. By the end of this phase, she had transformed the environment that had once been oppressive into one she could navigate with confidence, ensuring that future challenges could be met from a position of increased stability and autonomy. The consequences for those who had sought to dominate her were subtle but profound. Their assumptions about her compliance were challenged, their attempts at control were often thwarted indirectly, and the dynamics of authority shifted in ways that they did not anticipate. Her story, in this context, becomes not merely a personal narrative but a case study in resilience, strategy, and the quiet accumulation of power under conditions designed to suppress it. Scholars, psychologists, and social analysts recognize that such outcomes are possible when individuals leverage patience, observation, strategic inaction, and subtle intervention to achieve objectives without drawing immediate attention or provoking confrontation. In recounting this period of her life, we see the interplay of vulnerability, observation, patience, and strategy, all contributing to a trajectory that gradually shifted the balance of power in her favor, demonstrating that influence need not always be loud or overt to be profoundly effective. And it is in this careful, deliberate, and silent orchestration that her true mastery emerges, revealing how resilience, intelligence, and strategic patience can convert oppression into agency and subtle maneuvering into lasting empowerment, creating a legacy that resonates far beyond the immediate circumstances of a life, offering lessons that extend to any context where individuals face imbalance, scrutiny, and systemic pressure. As time progressed, the woman's mastery of her environment became increasingly evident, though still invisible to most of those around her. Every interaction, every decision, and every moment of apparent passivity was actually part of a broader, meticulously constructed strategy that allowed her to navigate danger, assert influence, and protect herself without triggering overt retaliation. The cumulative effect of her patience, observation, and carefully measured actions transformed her presence from one assumed to be submissive into one quietly commanding respect and attention. She recognized patterns in behavior that others overlooked, noticing inconsistencies, hidden motives, and unspoken fears, and she used this insight to anticipate events before they unfolded. Her life, which had once felt constrained by the expectations and surveillance of family, neighbors, and authority figures, gradually expanded into a domain where she could exercise agency while remaining under the radar. Experts in social dynamics and psychological resilience note that such skillful navigation of power hierarchies requires a combination of acute observation, emotional intelligence, and the ability to respond strategically rather than impulsively, qualities she exemplified with remarkable consistency. The turning points in her journey were often subtle, invisible to outsiders, yet monumental in their consequences. A seemingly minor gesture could shift perceptions, a carefully timed question could expose hidden intentions, a silent pause could compel others to reveal their true motives. These moments, while small on the surface, accumulated over time to create an environment increasingly attuned to her influence, where those who sought to dominate her were often manipulated into actions that inadvertently reinforced her position. Her strategy was never reckless. Each move was calculated, each response measured, ensuring that potential threats were neutralized without direct confrontation. She learned to read both the overt and covert signals of social interaction, the tone of a voice, the alignment of a glance, the subtle inflection in words that could betray anxiety, anger, or uncertainty. By interpreting these cues, She created opportunities to guide outcomes subtly, shaping the behavior of others while maintaining the appearance of compliance. This approach required constant vigilance, a balancing act between observation and intervention, as well as the ability to endure periods of apparent passivity without losing focus or determination. Her resilience was tested repeatedly, through sudden changes in household authority, unexpected scrutiny from neighbors, and the pressures of social expectations that could shift unpredictably. But she remained composed, using each challenge as an opportunity to refine her strategy, strengthen her insight, and assert influence in ways that remained invisible to those around her. Scholars studying historical and contemporary examples of resilience in oppressive environments emphasize that such long-term, strategic navigation is often underappreciated because it lacks the immediate drama of overt confrontation, yet it can be far more effective in achieving sustained empowerment and safety. In her case, the accumulation of subtle victories, moments of information gathering, carefully timed interventions, and skillful manipulation of social expectations created a foundation of power that was durable, resilient, and largely unrecognized by those who assumed they retained control over her. Her story illustrates the profound capacity of the human spirit to endure, adapt, and assert agency even in environments designed to suppress individuality. She demonstrated that true power need not always be loud, aggressive, or visible. It can be cultivated through patience, observation, and strategic subtlety, revealing itself gradually, quietly, yet with profound impact. As she continued to navigate her world, she began to see the broader implications of her choices, not only for herself but for others who might follow a similar path of silent resistance. Her actions, while deeply personal, created ripples that challenged assumptions, revealed hidden vulnerabilities, and reshaped the dynamics of power within her household and community. The lessons embedded in her experience are evident to anyone who studies the interplay between vulnerability and resilience, submission and strategy, oppression and empowerment. Experts today often cite her case as a compelling example of how individuals can maintain agency in restrictive, surveilled, or coercive environments through intelligence, patience, and subtle, deliberate action. Her silence, which many had mistaken for weakness, ultimately became a source of influence, control, and protection, demonstrating that apparent compliance can conceal profound strength. Modern parallels are abundant, from corporate hierarchies to social institutions, where individuals navigate complex power structures, often using observation, patience, and strategic discretion to achieve goals while avoiding unnecessary conflict. Her journey underscores a timeless truth. Strength is not always expressed in volume or force. Sometimes, it is measured in endurance, insight, and the careful orchestration of circumstances. Every subtle choice, every calculated pause, every moment of observation contributed to a broader strategy that allowed her to reclaim agency and influence in a world that sought to limit her. And it is precisely this combination of patience, resilience, and strategic subtlety that defines her legacy, offering a blueprint for navigating oppressive or restrictive systems with intelligence and composure. Her story reminds us that empowerment often comes not from confrontation alone but from understanding, timing, and the deliberate accumulation of knowledge and influence. The challenges she faced, the threats, scrutiny, and pressure to conform, were formidable, yet she transformed them into opportunities for growth, skillful navigation, and quiet dominance within her environment. Each interaction became a test, each observation a tool, each silent choice a step toward autonomy. Over time, her careful orchestration yielded results that were both unexpected and irreversible, as the structures of control she once endured were subtly reshaped in her favor. Friends, family, and authorities who had assumed they held unchallenged power were confronted with outcomes they had not anticipated, revealing that influence does not always require visibility, confrontation, or aggression to be effective. Her resilience, strategic acumen, and unwavering composure illustrate how individuals can convert systemic oppression into a platform for autonomy, using intelligence, observation, and patience to navigate risk, assert influence, and protect themselves in ways that may remain invisible to outsiders. In reflecting on her journey, it becomes clear that the power she wielded was not measured in immediate victories or dramatic confrontations, but in the sustained, cumulative effect of strategic actions, subtle influence, and disciplined patience. This approach allowed her to endure challenges, maintain dignity, and ultimately reclaim authority over aspects of her life that had once seemed entirely constrained by external pressures. Her experience demonstrates that empowerment can emerge through resilience, quiet mastery, and strategic engagement, revealing that even in the most restrictive circumstances, the human spirit has the capacity to adapt, endure, and prevail. For those seeking to understand how individuals navigate highly controlled or oppressive environments, her story provides a compelling illustration of the interplay between vulnerability, strategy, and eventual empowerment. It highlights the importance of observation, patience, and careful action in achieving influence where direct confrontation might be too dangerous. And it reinforces a broader truth that extends across historical and contemporary contexts. Silence, when wielded thoughtfully, can be a profound form of power, capable of reshaping relationships, hierarchies, and outcomes in ways that are both subtle and enduring. Through the lens of her experience, we witness how resilience, intelligence, and strategic patience can convert adversity into opportunity, demonstrating that even those who appear most constrained have the potential to assert agency, protect themselves, and effect meaningful change in environments designed to limit their autonomy. Her journey, marked by careful calculation, enduring patience, and subtle orchestration of influence, stands as a testament to the capacity for human adaptation and empowerment under the weight of systemic pressure, offering insights and lessons that remain relevant for anyone navigating situations of constraint, scrutiny, or control, proving that quiet strength can be just as transformative, if not more so, than overt force. Her story is a profound reminder that true power often lies not in force, volume, or visibility, but in patience, strategy, and resilience. The woman they tried to break did not fight with anger or confrontation. She fought with observation, timing, and quiet determination. Every moment of silence was purposeful, every careful choice a building block of her eventual empowerment. Through years of scrutiny, pressure, and expectation, she transformed what many perceived as weakness into an instrument of strength, proving that endurance, intelligence, and calculated patience can shift the balance of power in even the most oppressive environments. Her journey teaches us that resilience is not always loud. It can be subtle, invisible, and remarkably effective. It demonstrates that when individuals understand the dynamics of their surroundings, read intentions, and act with foresight, they can navigate seemingly impossible circumstances and reclaim agency in ways that defy the assumptions of those around them. This narrative is both a historical case study and a timeless lesson for modern life, reminding us that even in restrictive workplaces, relationships, or societal systems, strategic patience and thoughtful action can create lasting impact. The quiet accumulation of influence, insight, and control, when wielded carefully, can outlast the immediacy of overt confrontation and produce outcomes that are enduring and transformative. As we reflect on her journey, we see the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit, the subtle power of silence, and the remarkable ways individuals can assert agency when the world seems intent on suppression. Her story resonates far beyond her own life, offering lessons about courage, adaptability, and the strength found in observation, patience, and careful action. It challenges us to reconsider how we define power, influence, and resistance, showing that strength is not always loud, but it is always present, even when unseen. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon, like the video, and tell us in the comments what type of stories you'd like to see. Share your thoughts, your reflections, or even moments in your own life where quiet patience became a form of strength. Her journey reminds us that silence can be powerful, endurance can be transformative, and strategic action can reclaim what was once thought lost.